You've done everything right. You were patient. You were understanding. You gave them the space they asked for, and it still didn't work. In fact, the better you treated them, the further they ran. You became more available, more careful with your words, more considerate of their needs, and they became a smaller presence, more guarded, more certain that the space between you was exactly where they needed to stay. So you tried harder, and they disappeared further. And at some point, you stopped asking what you were doing wrong and started wondering if something was fundamentally wrong with you. It isn't, but the approach is. So here's the question. If avoidants fear closeness, why do they chase right after you stop chasing them? Most people try to fix it the obvious way. More communication, more vulnerability, more effort to show them you're safe, that you're not a threat, that the relationship is worth staying for. But with avoidance, that usually makes things worse. Because every move you make toward them confirms exactly what their nervous system already believes, that closeness leads to pressure, and pressure leads to withdrawal. You become a larger presence in their emotional space, and they instinctively shrink to compensate. The more you expand toward them, the more they contract away from you. It isn't personal. It is physiological. Their system is not responding to your intentions. It is responding to your proximity. Because avoidants don't respond to effort. They respond to perception. Not what you do, but what they sense about where you are emotionally, whether you need them, whether you're waiting, whether you're still oriented in their direction. That perception shapes everything. It tells them whether the dynamic feels safe to stay in or necessary to escape. And as long as your energy is pointed toward them, even quietly, even patiently, they feel it. And feeling it keeps them at a distance. Not because they don't care, but because need to an avoidant doesn't feel like love. It feels like a wall closing in. And the version of you they're reacting to is not the one you think. But before we get there, there's a specific trap most people fall into when they try to make this shift. A way of faking it that doesn't just fail to work. It actually pushes the avoidant away permanently. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what that trap is and how to avoid it. The moment everything changes is when you stop being emotionally available in the same way. Not cold, not distant as punishment, not performing detachment so they notice. Just different, genuinely rerouted. And this is not abstract. This is not about energy in some vague, intangible sense. This is concrete. It's the moment you stop checking whether they viewed your Instagram story. It's the Sunday afternoon where you actually forget to look at your phone for 3 hours because you're finally focused on that project you kept putting on hold. It's the Tuesday evening where you make plans, real plans, without leaving a gap in case they reach out. That is a shift. Small, mundane, completely unglamorous, and absolutely unmistakable to someone who had grown accustomed to being your quiet gravitational center. Because now, something feels off to them. You're not chasing, not waiting, not angling yourself in their direction, hoping for a signal. The dynamic they understood, the one where they withdrew and you pursued, has stopped functioning the way it used to. They pull back, and instead of you moving closer, you simply keep moving forward. And for the first time, they can't read you. Research from the University of Toronto found that avoidant individuals are acutely sensitive to shifts in a partner's emotional availability, specifically when someone who was once highly responsive becomes less focused on pursuing connection. Their attachment system registers that shift as urgent new information, not consciously, not with self-awareness, but physiologically. Their nervous system notices before their mind catches up. The coordinates they use to locate you no longer apply, and that disorientation lands somewhere they were completely unprepared for. Here is the paradox no one explains. When you were available, fully, consistently, reliably available, the avoidant felt enmeshment anxiety. The closeness felt like pressure, like the walls narrowing, like something they needed to create distance from just to breathe. So they pulled away, and that felt like relief. But now that you're genuinely gone, not performing distance, but actually redirected, they feel something different. Separation anxiety. The quiet, unsettling awareness that the safety net they never acknowledged is no longer there. Two opposite fears. The same person. And right now, yours is the absence triggering the second one. And that uncertainty is what pulls them back in. because what they were comfortable with before was your predictability. You were a fixed point, always somewhat oriented in their direction, always available in the background, even when they weren't engaging. That predictability was their regulation. It let them maintain distance without ever truly risking loss. They could pull away because they knew, somewhere beneath the surface, that you'd stay close. The push and pull only worked because your side of it never really moved. You were the constant, the one who absorbed the distance without disappearing. And that constancy, as painful as it was for you, was the invisible foundation underneath the entire dynamic. Distance only feels risk-free when you're certain the other person will absorb it indefinitely. The moment that certainty breaks, everything shifts. But here's the part most people miss. They're not chasing you. They're chasing the shift, the version of you that no longer revolves around them, because the old version, the one that waited over-explained, made itself smaller hoping it would create safety. That version was manageable, familiar, already sorted and filed. This version doesn't fit the category they built. This version has somewhere else to be, somewhere else to direct its energy. And a person with somewhere else to be is not someone you can keep at a comfortable distance without consequence. Remove the certainty of your constancy, and the architecture of the whole dynamic collapses underneath them without warning. That's when they start reaching out, testing the connection, a message slightly warmer than usual, an effort that wouldn't have appeared 6 months ago, showing up in small ways, slightly more present, slightly more open, harder to dismiss as coincidence, acting more interested, but never fully explaining why, because they can't explain it. They're not operating from clarity or sudden self-awareness. They're operating from discomfort. The internal map they use to navigate you no longer matches the terrain. And instead of moving on, they move toward you, trying to locate you again, trying to restore the version of the dynamic where they knew exactly where you stood. And here's the trap, the one I mentioned at the beginning. Most people, the moment the avoidance starts reaching out, immediately revert. The warmth comes back. The availability floods back in. The gravitational pull toward them returns. Because finally, they're showing interest. And the moment that happens, the avoidance nervous system resets. The enmeshment anxiety returns. The pressure returns. And they pull away again. Not because they're cruel, but because the trigger that activated their pursuit, your genuine redirection, just disappeared. You have to remain the new version, not as a strategy. Not to punish them, but because the new version is the one that is actually living, because this version of you removes their sense of control. And for avoidance, control feels like safety, not control over you as a person, but control over the emotional landscape, knowing the door is unlocked even when they're not walking through it. That quiet background certainty is what lets them stay regulated. And when you change, genuinely, not as performance, that certainty dissolves. The door they assumed was permanently open is no longer something they can take for granted. They aren't coming back because they suddenly realize they love you. They are coming back because the safety of knowing you were waiting is gone, and they are trying to get that safety back, understanding that distinction matters, because it changes how you hold yourself when they return. You're not the relieved version who finally got the response they were waiting for. You're the grounded version who has simply continued becoming who they were always supposed to be. Choosing this new version of yourself is lonely at first. The rerouting is real work. It means sitting with the discomfort of not reaching out, of not checking, of letting the silence exist without filling it. If you're in that place right now, you don't have to do it alone. That's exactly why we built this community, a space where we practice the rerouting we're talking about today. So when you change, they feel it, not as love, not as sudden clarity about what they lost, but as something they can't ignore anymore, a quiet instability where there used to be certainty, something unfamiliar occupying space they thought they had already resolved. And that feeling doesn't allow them to stay comfortably distant. It pulls, quietly, persistently, without offering them a clean reason to explain it away. And that's why they come back, not because you chase them, but because you finally stopped.